What is going on here? Okay. I think we're finally live. Took a little while to get going today. Had some technical difficulties with the game itself as I was preparing to get the demo state prepared to show you all. And then had some broadcasting problems, which is the first time. And it took forever to actually start streaming. So I wasn't sure whether it was actually working or not. So I'm actually going to open up my channel here so I can see the chat, which I can't see in the plugin at the moment. So I haven't got it set up exactly as I need to, but that's okay. We'll have it listening on the actual, I'll watch on the actual channel itself. So, okay. There is quite a bit to update you all on, actually, despite the last few months prior to December being very quiet and not having the time to work on the game. Prior to that period, spent a good solid 8 months working on the game's underlying architecture and the engine that basically powers it all, which we've called Time Warp, and there's a good reason for that. But it seems to be working quite well, and I'm getting a warning on the stream. Hopefully everything's still working okay, but we'll see. So the last, what is it, 19th of January here. So it's been, probably a good solid 6 weeks of development on the game. First starting with a fairly large number of fixes that were to address the bugs that came up through the pre-alpha first test. And that was really good. Helb, thanks again, once again, for helping us out so much with that. So start of December was really about working through all of those bugs and resolving those issues. And then I did a fair bit of experimentation with technology. So I'm going to update you all on that, just talk about that side of it, and then we'll kind of get into the really exciting stuff. So, one of the goals for the game is to actually deploy it cross-platform, like truly cross-platform. So what that means is, you obviously be able to play it in the browser. You'll be able to play it as part of a desktop client, installable desktop client. You'll be able to play it on your mobile. And in the future, hopefully, even as a Steam-based client. So in my opinion, an installable client doesn't make as much sense just because of the nature of the game, which is essentially, you log on a few times a day, do what you need to do to kind of keep your empire humming along. But then outside of that, like you're not on it, all the time. It's not like a action RPG MMO like Path of Exile or something where you're sitting there for hours at a time. Halcyon and other games of its nature are a little bit different. And so, Halcyon Online harkens back to sort of, in my view, the golden age of MMO RTSs, which are games like, Starsphere, the sort of OG Dark Galaxy, and then I think O-Game came along in like 2008, 2009, something like that. So, those games, in my opinion, are one of the best representations of this particular niche subgenre. And so the result of that is that Halcyon Online, sort of the classic mode, is quite slow. So, an entire Galaxy season will be about sort of 3 to 6 months, which means that, sort of as you get towards mid and end game, the things that you're doing, building structures and doing research and all that sort of stuff takes a long time. We're talking sort of, days and sometimes weeks to kind of get things finished. But also by that time, hopefully you sort of got like, 20, 25 colonies that you're managing. So despite these things taking a long time, you're still managing a lot of different things at the same time. And I think the slow pace of those things taking a long time and sort of managing so many colonies actually gives you some breathing room. But of course, we will have galaxies that go faster. So if you want to play on galaxies that's sort of, done and dusted within a sort of 3-4 week period, we'll definitely have those. And then of course, we're also going to have campaign mode, which is a linked series of galaxies where you're playing in a specific sector of the galaxy. And the progress that you make in one galaxy, it's a part of that progress actually carries over to the next galaxy. So start at a sort of an advanced position. Sort of like roguelikes in the sense that you complete a run, you unlock some things, and then you take those things along with you for future runs. So that's sort of what that's what I sort of want to achieve with campaign mode. So players want to play a much faster game pace and sort of have that slightly sort of more role-playing experience with the progression and that sort of thing between games. We'll definitely be interested in that sort of thing. So let's talk about this experiment I was talking about. So with wanting to support the game across many devices, there's challenges there in regards to writing code that will work on all these devices. And there aren't many solutions for that. So one of the technologies that can do that is called Flutter, which is written or developed by Google. And that, from what I could tell, works really well. And, I was doing some testing with that. I basically got the homepage and a few of the other things working in that and looking really good. And so I decided to do a test build of the game just to see how it runs. And to my surprise, to get it running for the web, it's 1.5 megabytes download just for the JavaScript for the Dart libraries. So Dart is the underlying programming language that powers Flutter. 1.5 megabytes is massive when it comes to the web. To give you an idea, I expect the entire client-side code for Halcyon Online to be within a couple hundred kilobytes. So that means, sort of once you get to, sort of the live state. So that means that the game's build size using Flutter, 80% of it, 75 to 80% of the build size is actually in Flutter. So once I sort of realized that, that is definitely not the path forward we want to take. That's just too big. Halcyon Online is going to be a very pretty looking game. Obviously, it's going to be mostly static 2D images until we can kind of start developing 3D assets, which is what I want to do with the installable game client. So, when we do the desktop client in the future, you'll have 3D planets, you'll have 3D, they're called skyboxes, so sort of around the planet, which would basically be the galaxy around you. All of the ships and everything will be 3D. So that's a long ways off, but it gives you an idea in regards to thinking sort of very far in the future what we want to do here. So the desktop client wants to be able to support 3D in the future. And so, getting all those things working nicely is quite tricky. So Flutter's not gonna help for us. The cool thing about Flutter is that it can build JavaScript for the web. It builds the game client to the native code of the platform. So, for example, if you're developing for iPhone, it compiles down to is it Swift? Can't remember the exact language now, but it's sort of Apple's own language. If you're developing for desktop, it changes again. So it's actually compiling as best it can down to the native code of the selected platform, which essentially just means that the overall experience is much smoother. Because if you have to run the game client inside essentially a browser client, like V8 or whatever it is, which runs inside Chrome, it's just a little bit slower, right? So we're trying to look for the best possible experience. So we're not going to be using Flutter. So we did a bit of a spike on that. It didn't work out. So next thing, let's talk quickly about the pre-alpha update. So last September, we opened up the pre-alpha tests for the testers that signed up. Unfortunately, didn't get too much input from the majority of testers, but again, Helb, if you see him around the Discord, give him many thanks, was just logging so many bugs, which is actually amazing. So as a result of that, over those past few months up to December, rolled out a lot of fixes. And the long and short of it is that the underlying game engine is now, or at least appears to be running really smoothly. Not seeing any real issues. It's stable and appears to be quite robust. And that obviously means that the infrastructure side of the game is practically done. So if you're unaware, that first pre-alpha test phase was essentially to test the game engine itself. So there weren't many game features to actually test outside of a fairly bare bones infrastructure implementation. But with that in place, and with those fixes now completed, it basically means that the underlying architecture is finished and we can start to move actually quite quickly with developing the game features, which is a pretty exciting place to be. And we're looking to start the next alpha test run from next month. So that'll be pre-alpha test phase 2, which is going to be super, super cool. And there'll be more information about that to come in the following weeks. But that will essentially open up both infrastructure and research and technology, which is a big piece. And I'm going to showcase some of the research stuff today. Although it's not fully functional yet, I want to show a lot of the work that's been done on the UI and the user experience, because I think it's coming along pretty nicely. But it hasn't been wired up to the back end yet. And the reason for that is, unlike the infrastructure and sort of building on your colonies, the hard part for that was actually the game engine and getting that working before we did the UI. When it came to research, because the game engine is now mostly in place, it's now sort of working on the hard parts of the UI and then implementing the specific feature requirements for research and technology. So that's really cool. So we should be doing the pre-alpha phase 2 test in February, if not early March. So it really depends on how we go over the next few weeks. The result also of the pre-alpha test was, I found personally, there wasn't enough information in the UI itself to kind of show players, what's sort of happening on their colony and what impact the construction projects that they're executing is actually having on the colony. So that's been implemented, and I'll showcase a little bit of some of that today. And we're actually going to go, as part of the demo, we're going to go through basically a new colony when you join a galaxy, right up to a feature that I'm going to unveil today, which I think is quite unique and looks awesome. I mean, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I'm pretty proud of it. And I think it's going to be a feature that just, I think some players are going to be kind of blown away by it. So we'll demo the infrastructure state. I'll also go into some stuff about research and then a few other things. Next thing I just want to quickly talk about, and then we'll start getting into actually 2 points there. One is about notifications, one is about responsive design. So we'll start about responsive design because that's probably the most boring piece of today. But essentially, when I was, as I've been working on the project, it's mostly been sort of on a sort of standard desktop size. So, sort of 4K resolution, if not a little bit lower than that. And what that has meant historically is that the game didn't look good even on basically laptops, which is, a bit of a problem. So spent quite a bit of time over the last few weeks getting the game looking pretty good at basically MacBook size laptops, MacBook Pro. So I think mine's a 15-inch MacBook Pro. And I also want to get down to 13. Once you get down to 13, getting it working on landscape orientation for tablets, for example, should be pretty straightforward. I'm looking forward to that. And then from there, we'll start getting it working on mobile. So I think you'll see pretty soon when I do the demo why mobile is going to be last and why it's so difficult to support. But the long and short of it is there is so much information that I want to show to players to make it really clear in regards to what's going on with their colonies, what's going on with their empire, and making it really easy to manage those things, that fitting all that information on a mobile is quite challenging. So, I'm working on it on the side, but it is proven to be quite difficult. And as you sort of get further on in the game's development, there's going to be more and more information to show. So we kind of need to figure that out. So mobile will be the last to be developed, but I suspect we'll probably get working on that in earnest towards the end of the year as we head towards open beta. And then hopefully sort of mobile support not long after that. So check the stream quickly, see if there's any questions, and we'll go from there. So, okay, cool. So Nuffledrak asks, is there then really a good benefit or purpose for still going for a browser-based system and not just port to client right away? I think there is. In my mind, at least, these games are browser games first and foremost. But I think being able to support, all of these different platforms for the game means that players can kind of, play the game with whatever device they're most comfortable on, right? So, if they're sort of sitting back late at night and they want to hop on the tablet while they're watching TV, play a bit of Halcyon Online, that's going to be my, honestly, ideal situation. So I'm looking forward to that. But, if players just want to have the client open all the time and they're constantly checking in on things, that's cool too. And I think in that case, you'd sort of need an installable client to be able to do that. yeah, so I think browser always first, at least for this type of games. But then, sort of as we head towards hopefully supporting 3D models and that sort of thing, then we'll get towards a Steam-based client as well, which I think is going to be pretty exciting. Thanks for that question. Okay, so let's talk quickly about notifications, and then we'll do a demo of the current state of the game. And there's quite a bit to go through there. So I wanted to talk about notifications. And the reason for this is I think it's pretty important. So the game will support at launch 2 types of notifications. One will be email-based notifications, and that'll be for subscribers only. I'll go into detail in regards to why that is in a minute. And the other will be push-based notifications. So in both cases, these notifications are specific to when you're actually offline, so not when you're not actually in the game. When you're logged in and you're present in the game and you're doing various actions and that sort of thing, the notifications from the game will actually be shown right inside the game client. But as soon as you're offline, if something happens, so for example, construction's been completed, or you're being attacked, or you've received a message from a player, whatever it might be, you will then receive a notification based on your preferences. So if you want to receive a push-based notification, which essentially means that you get a notification on your desktop or your mobile, whatever it might be, then you can do that. Otherwise, you can also receive email-based notifications. So, let's say, for example, you wake up in the morning, you're checking your emails just before work, and you see that, you've got some hostility heading your way. It's basically, a call to action, right? So you can hop onto your colony, do whatever it is you need to do, reinforce your shields, or send your fleet away if you want to, or whatever it might be. So the idea there being is that you can always be connected to the game, even if you're not actually online. And the notification system, you can receive push and email if you like, and you can also configure what notifications you actually want to receive. Maybe you don't care about whether or not a project's been constructed or whether it started, these sorts of things. So you can configure all that stuff as well. So it's not completely finished yet, but we're definitely making some good progress on that. And that should be live by the next alpha test. And there's quite a bit of work there to do actually on the styling of the emails. Email styling is an absolute pain in the ass to work with. So I hate doing it, but it has to be done. So, and that's just, making those notifications look really nice, but also, really clear in regards to what's going on. So you can see at a glance exactly the state of the game for your particular colonies or for your empire. Okay, so if there's any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer those. If not, let's hop straight into a demo. So I'm going to go over to my thing here. Okay, so I haven't joined this galaxy yet, so we're going to join that first, and then we're going to get basically straight into some features. So the first thing I want to show off is just the additional information in the game. So in the previous demo, I think we had resources here, but that was about it. Maybe the nodes. So this is the resources that are currently available on your colony that you're visiting. So obviously, as you change colonies, this updates and changes. You also see here basic colony information. So the coordinates of where your colony is located, the name of your colony. This obviously will be updatable in the future. This is actually pulled from the database, but it's not editable. So you'll be able to name your colony. You'll also be able to give, for those that like to really sort of immerse themselves in a game, give a bit of background in regards to your colony, your planet, and that's all super cool. And that gets used in sort of different areas around as well. So if players sort of scan your planet and can see that there's a colony there, they sort of see that information as well. So you can actually give information to other players. And it could be a role-playing type thing where you're giving background information on your colony, or it could be like antagonistic, right? It's just like, come at me if you dare. Whatever it might be. If you want to leave a message for other players, it's absolutely fine. Of course, keeping it PG rated, this stuff will be filtered by default because, this is a PG safe game. And so obviously, those things need to be in place as well. So back to this, so you'll see resources there. You'll see the nodes that are available on your colony. Now, colonies, all of the starting homeworlds for colonies have the exact same resources and the exact same nodes. The map itself, which you'll see in a minute, might be a little bit different between colonies, but otherwise, they sort of adhere to the same rules. So there is a little bit of variation in the starting homeworld, but otherwise they're pretty identical. And then finally is the effect. So at the moment, the only effects we actually have in place on the colony is construction speed, and that's just so you can get started, right? So you'll see here over on the right-hand side, we don't actually have much information for the overview, right? There's, in all honesty, there's a lot of stuff that we can show here in the future, such as like, what's being built, what has been built, what's being researched, what has been researched, what spacecraft are currently in production, what your fleets are up to. There's a lot of information that can be displayed here, but we're not working on that yet because, well, we're not at that point. So in the future, the overview is effectively a brief summary of everything that's going on that particular colony at any one time. And then you've got research, production, all that sort of stuff. So obviously you're not at that point yet, so we can't do these things. That's why they're grayed out. So let's go to build some stuff. So first thing you'll notice there is that there's a really nice transition and animation between the different views. So if I go back to overview, sort of an overview, bit closer look at the planet. When you go to build, it zooms out so we can actually get the colony map displayed there, which I think is super awesome. This is referred to as the terrestrial map, and we'll start building some stuff. So first thing we need to do is select a hex. So we'll select a hex. I can see the various structures that we're able to build or not build. So things that you can't build are in gray, and they've got this sort of like warning thing on here. So let's go, for example, to the solar farm, and let's figure out why we can't build this. So if we go to the dependencies, it says here that we've got a dependency on the manufactory, which we haven't constructed yet. If we hover over this, it literally tells you, structure has not yet been built. So, it's hopefully really clear to players why or when they can't do certain things, when they'll be able to. And there's a little bit of lore for all of the different structures and that sort of stuff. This is mostly placeholder. In the future, a lot of this stuff will actually be based on the actual in-game lore, in the sense that, how did solar farms come to be on these new colonies, and all sorts of stuff. So let's go back to select a project. Let's build our manufactory. We'll build that now, and away we go. So still a few things to do with the UI and UX, but hopefully it's pretty clear in regards to what's going on. This is all sort of happening in real time on the server. Once that's finished, this all gets completed. That's now at an upgrade state. It tells me that it's at tier 1 and we're good to go. So let's have a look at our structures. You can see that we've now got additional structures that we can actually build. So one being the extractor, the other being the solar farm. The extractor actually wants to be built on a materials deposit. You don't have to, it just means that if you don't build one on a materials deposit, the benefits of using extractor is considerably worse, especially once you build a bore mine. A bore mine wants to be built on a materials deposit. So it sort of bores into the crust of the celestial body and sort of extracts as much of those materials as possible. So let's do that first. We'll build the extractor, get that one going. There we go, see if there's any questions. No questions yet, that's cool. And these are the actual build times. Now at the moment, I think the galaxy speed is at 2 or 3 times the sort of the usual speed. But generally speaking, tier 1 of most of the buildings will generally be pretty quick. It's tier 2 and tier 3 where they sort of step up considerably, especially in classic mode, right? So in classic mode, I could see the extractor at tier 3 taking, a day or whatever to build. Maybe sort of tier 2 is like 6 hours or something like that. So, but with the faster galaxy speeds, these things sort of come down to seconds and minutes. Okay, we've got the extractor. That's all built now. Now, one thing I want to point out here is we go back to the resources. You'll notice now that we actually have 6 materials and still 3 energy. So the reason for that is because the extractor, when built on a minerals deposit, effectively, you see here, improves materials production by 200%. That's when it's built on a materials deposit. And then you'll see when we go to our effects, we've now got an additional effect here, which is a materials output multiplier. And it tells you that it's coming from the extractor or a T1 extractor, right? So it's all there. So next thing we want to do is, because we've got sort of low energy and we want to sort of build up to some of the more complicated buildings that require more, we're going to go to the installation field node and we're going to build the solar farm. So we'll do that now and get that going. And then I'll show you some other cool features. So I'm kind of got my fingers crossed and hoping everything still works because of the technical difficulties I had before. I was literally at a scramble trying to fix a couple of things that were causing me some problems, which I didn't expect. So, and that was because I hadn't done a test again from starting from scratch on a new colony. So next things there is if I go back to our resources again, you'll see here now we've now got 6 energy and 6 materials. Again, solar farm works in a very similar way to the extractor. It doubles the solar energy output. So next. If we go to let's an empty hex and see the projects we've got, you'll see these things are starting to sort of unlock now. So before we didn't even see assembly plant, and that's because the assembly plant is actually a district which needs to be attached to a manufactory. So if I move over here, for example, select project, you'll see there that the project disappears when I go there. So there's a little bit of work there. Obviously, I just noticed that when I select an assembly plant and I change a hex, that should actually probably go back to the build screen because it's no longer valid, but I'll fix that up later. So I want to build an assembly plant. The reason for that is because an assembly plant basically allows me to add one queue slot to the building capacity for the manufactory. So once I can build that, I can then start to queue up structures. So this is really good, particularly as you're sort of getting things built, especially in sort of classic mode where things can take a while. You can set up sort of and queue up other structures to be built. So if I go back over to the effects tab, you now see here I've got construction speed from the colony. I've got another 10% construction speed added by the assembly plant. And then I've also got the construction queue slots added there as well by the assembly plant. So, you'll see here, so as these structures get built, you're getting sort of more and more sort of effects applied to the colony. So effects can be both positive and negative, which is why I just haven't called it buffs or perks. And a good example of this is that if, for example, someone raids your colony, you'll have a negative effect on your output. And the reason for that is because they're raiding your colony. So they're sort of taking some of that, some of those resources away from you. Okay, so now we have a queuable manufactory. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to do two things. So the first thing I'm going to build is, can we build a bore mine yet? No. Actually, I don't think we can because I've got the other stuff set up. So first thing I'm going to do then is, what do we need to build a launch pad? We need a manufactory tier 2, and the cost is 1 materials and 2 energy. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to build, I'll see if I can build up. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to. Actually, just to be on the safe side, let's build up a few more resources. So I'll build up a solar field. Solar field is a district for the solar farm. So again, if I move away from the solar farm, you see it's not available. So it's only something that's for the solar field. So we'll build that out. And then you know what? Let's queue up an assembly plant as well and get that queued. So you can see here, it's now got like a little waiting timer on the structure to show that it's actually waiting to be built. And again, and there you go. So once the manufacturer is finished, it immediately jumped to the assembly plant and started constructing that one. So queuable stuff is really working. That took a long time to get right. There was a lot of problems with it, which Helm discovered, but we got there in the end. So now I've got 2 assembly plants attached to the manufactory. You'll also note that when I select the manufactory, there's like a little ring around it on the hex map. So that shows basically where you can build districts for the manufactory. And the same thing happens for the other structures, right? So you see there's a big ring around the solar farm and again for the extractor. So, I talked a long ago about this sort of like puzzle mini game that you have to play with your colonies. And that's certainly true as you sort of expand in the game and there's more and more structures you can build. You have to kind of like plan out and figure out where you're going to build things. Because otherwise, for example, if I built the extractor right next to a solar farm, it limits the districts I can build for those structures, which is obviously pretty important. So homeworld obviously is just the one where you want to sort of get off world and sort of start building colonies elsewhere. So your homeworld doesn't need too much, but you're going to find colonies whereby maybe it just has amazing materials output, and so maybe you want to set up your spacecraft production there because spacecraft production requires a lot of materials. But maybe one of them has a particular resource that you need, and it's just easy to kind of set up stuff there for that particular resource. So so you have to sort of plan these things. If you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. You can destroy these things and get rid of structures. The only cost to you is basically just time. So you've sort of lost time with doing that. So sometimes you can't destroy things. So for example, if I wanted to destroy the manufactory and it has districts, I can't destroy the manufactory. I've got to get rid of the districts first. But otherwise you can kind of get things out of the way and do all that sort of thing. Okay, so next things first. We were talking about doing a launch pad. So let's talk about, actually, no, before we do that, let's build a laboratory. Laboratory is obviously necessary for research. And you can see here, tier 1 provides research capabilities for the colony. And then the 2 tiers above that basically provide a pretty large boost to that. So that should be now done. We're finished. So now we go to research. So this is one of the things I wanted to show off today. So we go to research. And then again, you see this really nice transition of the planet and the viewport. But you'll see here that this is not, I can't actually research anything yet. And the reason for that is because in order to actually do research, you also have to build the relevant research district for the laboratory. So each of the research arms, so infrastructure, exploration, and defense, all have their own research wards, which you have to build. So before we do that, let's go back to the build screen and let's attach a ward. You can see here, we've now got the 2 wards available. And let's start with the infrastructure ward, because I think that one's pretty cool. I'm going to build that one. And then we're going to go back to infrastructure, and we're going to queue up. Oh, I can't do it yet because I think we don't have the resources for it yet. Yeah, there you go. It was just, I need to make that a little bit clearer. That was a bit hard to see. And maybe I'll put it up here as well. Anyways, we can now build that. So, oh no, wait, not yet. Oh, okay, there's a little bit of a bug there. That's okay. Before we do that, let's go to research and check out the first arm of research. Let's check the live stream here. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go into infrastructure. So bear in mind, this is a very early build of this screen. And so there's bound to be quite a few changes here, but I think sort of the basics are currently in place. So when I go to all of these things, it's very similar to sort of the build screen, but for example, if I select sort of solar thermal power, it sort of tells me dependencies, all sorts of stuff. So again, this isn't fully functional yet, but I wanted to sort of show off the UI for this. One of the interesting things about this is that sort of research options have multiple requirements for them. So unlike infrastructure, which requires basically the correct hex to be selected, so for example, if you're building the extractor, you're building districts, you got to have the costs, you have the resources available, and you've got to have the dependencies available. With research, it's a little bit different in the sense that you need to have the dependencies completed, but you also have this limitation in regards to how far down the tree you can actually research. So, for example, when you first start out, you've got, I'm currently calling it sort of research depth. And so as you research these things, this blue line then sort of goes down further. So if I've researched the top 2, you would be able to sort of research down to the 3rd one. So you don't have to always research the next option down the research tree. You just, as you research more and more, that basically gives you more options available. So if I've researched, 6 different technologies, I could basically research down to depth of 7 on the research tree. And the reason for that is that although the tree at the moment looks pretty basic and simple, and that's because it is, in the future, there's going to be a lot more options here, right? So, as you sort of get towards mid and late game, you've got the space station you can build, you've got different space station districts, you've got solar arrays that you can build in space, which is to harness solar energy in space. You've got your different structures that you can build on different celestial bodies, such as the Dyson sphere for for a selected star, all these sorts of things. So there's a lot of stuff that will be in there in the future. At the moment, the options available to you are just basically the first era. And if you know what the first era is basically everything that you need to build as part of your first colony on your homeworld. That's era 1. Era 2 is basically all the stuff you then need to build and research to get to your second colony, which is things like colonization technologies and being able to basically colonize actual other celestial bodies and the other structures you need that are going to be sitting in space for that sort of thing, cargo hauling, all that sort of stuff. So that's basically era 2. So let's go back to build, because we've now done the infrastructure ward. Let's build the exploration ward. And get that one going, because I think exploration is really where things start to get super interesting in the game, because that exploration is all about discovering what's around you in your own solar system, as well as distant systems and other things. So if I go back to research, you'll notice here it's still selected. So one of the good things I think about the user experience is that I could go from this research and go, look at core extraction, for example, look at the dependencies, figure out, oh, I'm missing something here, go back to build the thing, come back to the research, and it's ready to go, right? So pretty straightforward. So now that the exploration mode is now finished, if we go here, the exploration mode there is done. If we go back to research, have a look at exploration, and you've got a whole stack of different technologies here. So this all starts basically with escape velocity or with optical systems. Optical systems are necessary to start building your observatories and your telescopes and all that sort of stuff, which allows you to observe other systems. When you observe other systems, you get sort of basic information about them. That allows you to start planning out where you're going to be sending out your colonization craft. But in order to send colonization craft, first you need to start building spacecraft, right? So you've got to research escape velocity, space flight. Once you've got space flight, you've then sort of got launch pad. Once you've got a launch pad, you can start developing these different technologies for your colonization craft. So radiation shielding, cryogenic chambers, and then you've got deep space habitats, that sort of stuff. Satellites are necessary for sending to, sort of other distant planets, and those planets could be within your own system. It could be, much further out, probes and that sort of stuff. But they unlock those sorts of things. So this is all sort of linked in regards to the different things you want to do. So generally speaking, you'd want to be doing sort of optical systems first, but it's not necessary. You could go for escape velocity and space flight first, and then start building satellites and maybe sending satellites up. It really depends on what you're doing, what your focus is, what your alliance is doing, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so with all that stuff in a way, we've covered a lot of stuff. Check if there's any other questions. Not at the moment. That's absolutely fine. We will keep going. So one of the things I really wanted to show off today, because I think it's super exciting and I'm hoping I can get it working, is the launch pad. Oh, right. That shouldn't be... Yeah, that's not tier 2. Okay, that's a bug there. I've got to fix that one up. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So on the launch pad, firstly, obviously it's red. So red or orange means that you're missing dependencies. There's dependencies missing in order to build it. Black means it's already built. Like there's no need to build it again. And in the future, I'll add filters at the top so you can show just things you haven't built, all that sort of stuff. But anyway, so in order to do the launch pad, we actually need to build a manufactory to tier 2. So let's do that first. And you'll notice here, if we go back to effects, there's more and more stuff here, right? So we've now got construction speed being affected by the colony itself. The 2 assembly plants that we have at tier 1. We've got the solar installation area, which is basically the amount of area you have available to actually collect solar energy. So that comes from your solar fields. Construction queue slots. So we've got 2 slots added because we've got 2 tier 1 assembly plants. You just saw there, construction completed. So now we've got construction speed bonus from manufactory tier 2. So all of this stuff is reactive and happening in real time, which is something I'm super happy and excited about. And I'm honestly getting really excited about playing this game for real, because it's just starting to head in a really nice direction, and I'm pretty happy about it. So let's do that. So now that we've done that, if I go back here, we've got tier 2 on the manufactory. Let's now build a launch pad. And this is the thing I wanted to show you guys, which I'm super excited about. So as you can see here, we're missing content. That's okay. It's early days. Let's build this and see what happens, because I want to show you something. This will only take a few seconds to build, and then we'll go. So when that finishes, hopefully this works. Cool. All right. So the astute among you would have noticed that we now have this button at the top right, and this allows us to switch between the 2 maps that are available to every celestial body. So we're now at the colony, so we're at the colony map or the terrestrial map. If we click on orbit, we switch to the orbital map around the colony. And you can see there we've got this sort of nice ring, which is basically the orbit ring around the planet. And this is super cool because there are different structures that you can build in space as opposed to actually on your colony. So even though the orbit-based structures are still actually part of that colony, it's actually built in space. Let's see what we can build. So the first thing we can potentially build, we can't because I haven't researched the technology to do it, but the first thing you will probably be building is the space station. It doesn't need to be the first. One of the things that you will be able to build is solar arrays, and solar arrays are basically just like solar farms that exist in space, and they basically collect that energy, send it back down to the colony. So there's a few reasons why we can't build a space station. The first is that we just don't have the resources. But the more important thing is the missing dependencies that we have. So at the moment, we're missing a dependency on the orbital structures technology. In order to get orbital structures, we need an infrastructure ward, laboratory, and manufactory. So if we go to our research, now it tells you sort of what research arm's part by telling you what ward it's a part of. So the infrastructure ward is generally responsible for the different sort of construction projects that you have. And orbital structures is sort of a combination between an infrastructure project and sort of exploration-based technology. So if we go to research again and go to the infrastructure award, you'll see here that orbital structures is down here. So it's 3 down that you have to build. If we click on orbital structures, again, you can see the dependencies here, right? So you need a manufactory, of course, you need laboratory tier 1, and you need an infrastructure award at tier 1 as well. And then that'll allow you to build a space station once, of course, you have the resources to be able to do so. And in order to actually get to a space station, however, you also need to, I think I might have simplified things a little bit just to get it working, but you do need a launch pad. So I think escape velocity is what provides the launch pad. I disabled that for the time being just so I could show you the differences between the 2 different maps on your colonies. But otherwise, when you build a launch pad, let's switch back to the colony view. Once you build a launch pad, this actually will require escape velocity to build, but then also to be able to build your space-based structures and all sorts of things. So there's quite a few things there. So, it's been simplified at the moment just to kind of showcase this kind of tech piece that we've built. And as you can see there, like the transition is really nice. So it sort of zooms out from the planet between the colony and orbit view. And one of the things that took a long time to get right is that, this is a size 2 planet. It's pretty small. Planets go all the way up to size 4. And so you can think, that the hexes come out even further for size 3 and then even further again for size 4. And so as a result, the planet's also bigger. So to support those hex maps. So by the 3rd test phase, we should have the ability for players to colonize multiple celestial bodies. And that's when you'll start to see sort of those sorts of things coming together. I think that's it for today. So let's check see if there's any other questions. Last chance for any questions you guys might have. Otherwise, we'll close down this stream for the time being. But I'm super excited. The UI has been completely revamped and changed to support this. This is currently running 1920 by 1080 size view. And that view at the moment is sort of max size within the browser. And the reason for that is because the more variations we have in the different resolutions that we support and the different sizes of everything makes it more and more difficult to make a user interface and a user experience that just feels really nice to use. Obviously, I could make this really big and support like the whole sort of screen on desktop. But the issue there is that sort of it would look, I think, probably a little bit too spaced out. And that's sort of the problem I had with the previous design, was that it was just, everything was just a little bit too spaced out. Your mouse had to go sort of like one side of the screen to kind of get back to other things. So like if I wanted to build a structure, for example, I would select a hex here, and then the little draw menu that came out over on the right-hand side here was all the way over here, right? And then I had to go back over here. It was just too much movement, too many things going on. So things have kind of just been tightened up a little bit. I suspect we'll probably review this again in the future. But if I showcase, for example, like this is currently at like desktop size. If I switch on my dev tools and combine it, bring it down to MacBook Pro size. So that's the MacBook Pro sizing for it. Let me have a look at the stream here, see what it looks like. Yeah, so you can see like that's sort of limited. That's MacBook Pro 15-inch at the moment. But you can see it's actually working pretty nicely. Everything still fits in here. So all the buildings in there, switch to orbit, everything's still working pretty nicely. Go to research, all the research stuff fits really nicely. So yeah, there's a bit of a bug here, obviously, with the draw menu. I'll fix that up, not a problem. But as we get smaller and smaller, it becomes more and more challenging. And the most challenging aspect actually is this central viewport area. Getting this to work on mobile, I think, is going to be quite the challenge. I've got to figure out a way to solve that, because more than likely what will happen is we'll probably use like maybe sort of pinch zoom gestures or something to kind of zoom in and zoom out. At least I think that's what will happen. And that obviously then has effect in regards to like the transition animations for the backgrounds and the planets. So the mobile has very different requirements and challenges as opposed to having the solution for the desktop and that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's it. All right, checking for last questions. Doesn't look like there are any, so I think that'll do for today. Thank you very much for joining. For those that joined, for those that are going to sort of watch this in the future, happy to answer your questions that you might have then as well. But overall, the game is starting to move at a pretty good place. Still a couple of things to do with infrastructure, but otherwise it's finished. But we're mostly focused on research and technology now. And so, those two sort of combined then leads us into basically spacecraft production and, colonization technologies and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, super exciting. Really, really looking forward to it. So thank you for joining. Talk to you guys all in the future, and I'll try and do these devlogs probably once every couple of months, a little bit more frequently, because I think there's going to be more and more to report on because we're starting to move pretty quickly. So